HIV prevention, tobacco policy, bird flu research. These are just some of the divisions that are eliminated across the FDA and CDC in the layoffs that are being made by the Department of Health and Human Services. Joining us right now with his reaction is former FDA Commissioner McClellan. He served under President George W. Bush. He's now the director of the Duke Margolis Institute for Health Policy. And Dr. McClellan, thank you for being here. First of all, let's start with the cuts. Is this a situation that you think these cuts will impact the health of Americans?
Becky, good to be with you. These are large cuts. So about 3,500 employees in totals from the FDA. That's about 18% of the workforce. And this is an agency that's had increasing responsibilities that you've described around new infectious diseases, around new kinds of medical products, around food, nutrition, safety issue, and around trying to reduce the burden of tobacco. It's early days, and the main part of the reductions were intended to affect support services like budgeting and press and communication and training, but additional employees have left because of the early retirement opportunities and because of bringing people back to work. And so a lot of potential for changes in how the agency works. Anytime you have a big disruption like this, a big reorganization. I think a lot of your viewers have lived through these. There can be a reduction in productivity at the beginning. The question is, can you manage through that and get to something that works more efficiently at the end? And it's a tall order for the FDA right now.
You did an overhaul, a reorganization at HHS when you were there as well. Is this comparable to that? Is this a larger reorg? Are there things that you would be watching and warning about?
It's similar, but it's significantly larger. That reorganization had some of the same goals, centralizing a lot of FDA functions like the ones I described, the so-called support functions under the department. It didn't have as large in the level of cuts, and it also differed in that we had largely our leadership teams for each agency in place before the reductions in force and the rearrangements occurred. That made for a better connection between the department and the different agencies. Here, for these kinds of reorganizations, it's really on the department leadership. So the secretary and his staff who are taking on a lot of new functions. The challenges we ran into before was that each agency had kind of different activities that it undertook. The inspections that FDA does locally are different than the CDC infectious disease investigations that they do locally. The communications needs for specialized information on medical product issues or a food safety issue is different from the issues that might come up in another agency. And all of that's going to be going through the department. And so it really puts a lot of pressure on the department to get it right and not create things that might be viewed as delays in access to accurate information or other challenges in supporting the agencies with their distinct functions.
Doctor, I guess one point I might make, and you can look at one-offs, and I was reading a couple of health equity. I don't know what the heck that is that they're getting rid of. But my only point would be, so you were with W that year. You had 8 years of Obama, 4 years of Biden. Does this look anything like what you knew of as the HHS, or is that at least something to consider, that you're following 8 years of the Obama presidency and then 4 of Trump, but then 4 of the Biden? I would figure they could have added so much to it that you wouldn't even recognize what we're talking about here, and maybe these cuts are warranted at this point.
It's a great question, and FDA is actually a lot larger today than it was even in 2019. I think one of the goals here is to try to get the staffing levels back to what they were then. What's happened between now and then, though, it was 5 years of gradual buildup. A lot of it was due to new legislation supported on a bipartisan basis by both parties to do more in the way of disease cures, additional steps to speed gene therapies and other advanced therapies to market that take complicated manufacturing, stuff that FDA didn't do before, new steps on rare diseases to get more specialized personnel and opportunities to work closely with patient communities on figuring out the best way to regulate those products. So the hope is, productivity tends to go down when you have a big reorg, but then goes back up. The hope is that through new information technology, other steps, these reforms can enable the FDA to do more with less. But it is going to be a challenging process for the new team coming in to deliver on that. I am pleased, by the way, to see that some of these initial cuts that did seem to affect people who were critical for ongoing functions. There was apparently a meeting yesterday between the FDA leadership, the career staff. You're going to have to build some new connections, connectivity together to manage effectively, to undo some of those potentially disruptive steps that would affect the direct, product reviews, the direct key functions of the agency. So that's exactly what to watch going forward.
Dr. McClellan, we had Dr. Scott Gottlieb, another former FDA commissioner who served in the last Trump administration. Yeah, and he worked for you before. He was on with us earlier this week, I think. Yeah, earlier this week. And he seemed pretty concerned about Peter Marks leaving the FDA because of all the programs he was running, not just vaccines, but also gene and cell therapy, mRNA technology, rare diseases, as you mentioned before, that any of these innovative things that were really new in the last decade at the FDA, really the push there, that could get swept out the door. Are you concerned about the ability to have innovation? What will you watch to see if that's on track or not?
Yeah, I share Dr. Gottlieb's concern. In addition to Peter Marks, whose departure was announced over the weekend, the deputy director of the Biologics Center, another very experienced regulator and analyst left. The head of the Office of New Drugs at FDA, also a very experienced leader who had worked particularly on a number of specialized rare drugs that can't just be approved using the usual clinical trials and methods. So there have been some senior departures. So I think the things to watch are there any more departures like that? That's a huge amount of regulatory expertise. Are there immediate steps like the ones I just mentioned that do look like they're being reversed? Does that continue to happen as issues show up? And then is the agency able to continue its usual work? Will it be able to meet its user fee deadlines? Will companies that have meetings scheduled get meetings with people, reviewers and experts at the agency who are knowledgeable about those issues? And then the next big thing, there are opportunities for gene therapy cures, for treatments for an unprecedented number of rare diseases, thanks to AI and innovations in data methods. I know the new FDA leadership team wants to work on those issues, but they've got to build up this new kind of reorganized foundation to do it effectively.